In the name of our loving, liberating, and life-giving God, amen.
Amen.
How many of you are familiar with that phrase that I just used? Oh my. Oh my. Okay. So, how many of you have heard that we are the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement? More? Yay. Okay. So, that phrase that we are loving, liberating, life-giving really dominates the larger church's literature right now, and it was coined by our current presiding bishop. That's how he references who we are and what is going on within this church. We are a loving, liberating, life-giving part of the Jesus movement, which started over 2,000 years ago and continues to this day through us. And those are beautiful words, aren't they? Loving, liberating, and life-giving. So that's what we are about. So I bring you greetings from the 79th General Convention of the Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society. Now, how's that one? How does that work for you, right? That's who we are. That is our official name from 1787, otherwise known as the Episcopal Church. That's our shorthand, okay? Because we are a church of bishops, the Episcopate, the Episcopal Church. So, anyway, I was a deputy, for those of you who do not know, to the General Convention, and I want to share with you some of what happened there that is, in fact, loving, liberating, and life-giving. We did many things, but I want you to know this, if you don't hear anything else this morning. This part of the Jesus movement is very healthy, it is very powerful, and it is growing, and that is good news. Our presiding bishop, as you know, is somewhat of a public figure now as a result of preaching at a particular wedding not too long ago, right? And he has been able to be sort of the face of this movement. But don't be confused about the fact that he is just a man who is repeating what Jesus said. He is not doing anything earth-shattering or new, groundbreaking kinds of preaching. He is preaching the gospel. He is preaching the gospel of love, a love that liberates and gives life to people. And he is simply preaching all those messages that we hear over and over again. The difference is he is very charismatic, he is very theatrical, and he absolutely grabs your attention, which is fabulous, fabulous. And we're kind of like riding in the wave behind him, and it's a beautiful thing. So let me just say, I want to give you some very boring information first. And I think that I forgot a very important piece. How many of you know what a General Convention is, so that if somebody stops you on the street, you can explain it in one sentence or less? Raise your hand. Okay, let me tell you this. The General Convention is the governing part, the legislative part of the Episcopal Church. And we are modeled after the United States government. So this is the legislative branch. That's all I'm going to say, and you can have another teaching of that some other time, some other place. So this is a gathering of people from all over the church who have been sent by each diocese to do the legislative work of the church. And what's the legislative work? It's the laws, it's the rules, it's the dogma, it's all the stuff that sits behind our existence. And so we gather to do this legislative work. And that's important. But the thing that was really important was what was overshadowing this whole time that we had together. It was 10 days. I was on the legislative committee, so I got up around 6 o'clock in the morning. I started legislative committee at 7:30. I got back to my hotel room around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Those are the kinds of days we had for 10 days. But they were glorious, and they were awesome, and they were wonderful. The legislative part, which is important, that I want to go through just very quickly, because some very important things happened. And I'm going to give you kind of like a one-sentence summary, and then Carol Miro served that you have been served notice that an email is coming to you with links for people to go to see what I'm about to talk about. Because this is important, but it's not as important as what I want to get to in a minute or so. So we dealt with marriage equality. We've been dealing with that for a while. But the thing that the General Convention now passed is that they are ensuring that same-sex couples can be married in their home church or diocese, even in dioceses where bishops have not authorized same-sex marriage liturgies. That's extremely important. There were 8 bishops who were holding out. And what can happen now is a person can still get married in their home parish with the rector's agreement, and the bishop will step back and let another bishop step in to oversee that process. Theoretically oversee. You heard a lot probably, or maybe not, about prayer book revision. And so, no, there's not going to be a prayer book revision, but yes, there can be revisions to the prayer book. So this is legislation. This is the way governments work, okay? And that's important, though, that they have not dedicated a set-aside time for a new revision to the prayer book. However, dioceses are allowed to come up with creative and new liturgies under the bishop's direction, and those liturgies can be shared with the other bishops. And at some point, if we move forward with a revision to the prayer book, and that will include all the things that we've had conversations about, inclusive language, non-gender specific language, etc., etc. So we are free to do that with the bishop's approval still. And it's like been legitimatized by the church. The other thing is that our prayer book has been memorialized. And nobody really knows what that means, but it's in the resolution. So, just leave it out there. Inclusive, here we go, inclusive resolutions that provided inclusion for transgender and non-binary individuals. We are leaders in this movement, and that's very exciting. There was a huge 24 resolutions, so we had 598 resolutions that we dealt with in 10 days. 598. No, yes, whatever. No, 519, 498 we actually processed and got through, and the other 19 were referred for additional work. 24 of those were about women. Yay. And sexism, harassment, and exploitation. Just read one thing. General Convention passed a number of resolutions aimed at addressing gender-based discrimination, harassment, exploitation, and set up a Seeking Truth, Reconciliation, and Restoration task force that will further study these events in our church. So, women are in good order in the Episcopal Church and it's being addressed in terms of the discrimination that still does exist in our church today. Immigration. We talked about immigration and passed a number of resolutions aimed at U.S. immigration reform and church support of migrants and refugees. We also had resolutions about evangelism and moving forward with evangelism, calling every Episcopalian, that be you, to take up evangelism as a spiritual practice and providing material to help you do that, which we will get to. This was extremely important. How many of you knew that prior to 1966, Cuba was part of the Cuba Episcopal Church was part of our church? How many of you knew that prior to 1966? 2, 3, okay. Well, in 1966, they were invited to leave because of what was going on with the Castro regime. And I found out an interesting thing from our bishop. The reason that they were invited to leave was not because we were, pulling back from Castro and what was going on there, but apparently Castro was going after anybody who had American ties and killing them. And so, to preserve the lives of the priests in Cuba, we parted ties with them. It caused them great damage because they lost financial support and things like that. At this convention, we welcomed them back, and it was fabulous. So, Cuba is back in our church. There were many resolutions passed on Israel and Palestine, and from investments to certain practices that are being done in each of those countries. Again, you can go out and look at the resolutions if you choose. The link that I sent, you can search by topic. If you care about hearing more about any particular topic, you just go to the link that I'm sending to Carol and call me if you need help. Supporting the church in Sudan and southern Sudan, there were resolutions about that with all the strife and the abhorrent, inhumane activities that are going on over there. And we have an Episcopal church there, part of our communion, and so in support of that. And then a new resolution was passed to support compensation for the president of the House of Bishops, which has never existed in the past. They serve similar to deacons. However, we just aren't going to go there. Anyway, so that was addressed. That's the legislation, so that's that. The other things that were going on at convention that just grabbed my heart. We had 3 joint sessions. A joint session is when the House of Bishop and the House of Deputies come together and have time together. And there were 3 programs because there are 3 focuses, for lack of a better word, in the Episcopal Church today. One is evangelism, one is racial reconciliation, and the other is creation care. Those are kind of the 3 pillars as you look at literature about who we are and what we do on our website. And that was instituted under the current presiding bishop. So we gathered and we had speakers talking about each of those areas. I only want to highlight one speaker. His name is Arno Michaelis. Arno Michaelis was a former founder and leader of the largest worldwide white supremacist organization ever. Arno Michaelis. And he was there as an inspirational speaker because his life turned around. I want to read you something from his website. I radiated hostility, especially towards anyone with a darker skin complexion than mine. And I had a swastika tattooed on the middle finger of my right hand. One time, I was greeted by a black lady at a McDonald's cash register with a smile as warm and unconditional as the sun. When she noticed the swastika tattoo on my finger, she said, "You're a better person than that. I know that's not who you are." Powerless against such compassion, I fled from her steady smile and authentic presence, never to return to that McDonald's again. That one action was the beginning of this man turning his life around. I won't go into that whole story, but he has a biography out called My Life After Hate, which I have not read, but I hear is extremely wonderful. After he started pulling away from white supremacism, he had an experience. Listen to this. When white supremacist Wade Michael Page murdered 6 people and wounded 4 in a Sikh temple in Wisconsin in 2012, Pardeep Kaleka was devastated. The temple leader, now dead, was his father. Okay, so Pardeep's father was killed in that mass murder. His family, who had immigrated to the U.S. from India when Pardeep was young, had done everything right. Why was this happening to him? Meanwhile, Arno Michaelis, the man I just told you about, a former skinhead and founder of one of the largest racist skinhead organizations in the world, had spent years of his life committing terrible acts in the name of white power. When he heard about the attack, waves of guilt washing over him, he knew he had to take action and fight against the very crimes he used to commit. After the Oak Creek tragedy, Arno, the skinhead, and Pardeep, the son of the man who was killed, worked together to start an organization called Serve to Unite, which works with students to create inclusive, compassionate, and nonviolent climates in their schools and communities. Their story is one of triumph of love over hate and of two men who breached a great divide to find compassion and forgiveness. So this man spoke to the General Convention on the day that we were focusing on racial reconciliation, and it was extremely powerful. And we had this kind of input coming at us throughout the convention of examples of love being the way. And this is another theme that constantly gets introduced through the Episcopal Church. This, if you listen to the wedding sermon, is what presiding bishop was saying. Love can change the world. And so we had that experience. And then we also had two public witness events. One, I believe you are familiar with, which is the Bishops United Against Gun Violence. This is the cross that we were wearing this year for that. And there was a public display in a park in Austin where we gathered to pray for changes in our gun control policies in this country. We had a speaker there who was the father of Carmen Shentrup, who was one of the girls who was murdered at Parkland. So that family was present with us and begging us to continue the fight for changes in gun control laws in this country. Another very powerful experience. And we left from there to go to the Hutto Detention Center to have a prayer service in witness of the women who were being held there and separated from their children. 240 women were in that prison. And there were 1,500 Episcopalians outside on an adjacent property, because we couldn't be on that property, who arrived in 19 buses and cars to make a statement and to pray and to be a witness in the world that this is wrong. We later got, I guess it was a Facebook statement from one of the grassroots organizations in Taylor, Texas, where we were, saying that the women were there with white cards behind the bars, waving them out the windows that we couldn't see because we were too far away. But they said they watched us every minute that we were there until the very last bus left and knew that they were not alone. So these two public witness statements just show us the power of being outside of our walls and what can happen. So this is something that is going around now. It's called the Way of Love. This is what the presiding bishop was talking about, because he has been motivating us and speaking, and people who hear him are like, yay, yay, rah, rah. And it's like being at a football game. Sorry, Bob. But it's like being at a football game with the cheerleaders, right? Except we aren't out there on the field, winning the game. We're cheering with the cheerleaders. And so the presiding bishop is getting everybody going rah, rah, and we're having revival services, and we're hearing all these wonderful things about love, love, love. Love can change the world. But we walk away and we say, how can I do that? How can I, Jan, here in St. A's or in Saunderstown or that, how can I make a difference? How is that even possible? And so here is a program that the church has put together that you can hear more about. But it's called The Way of Love and Practices for a Jesus-Centered Life. This is for individual growth. And there is a link in this email that you can see this online that Carol will be sending out at some point, that I'm sending to her. But it just talks